Tutan Reyes in the building.
Hey, and two, listen, man, it's not many times that we come together and we have a two-time Super Bowl champ, three-time Pro Bowler, all pro, also known as co-founder of the Player Coalition. But before we bring him in, one thing is what I want to do say is this. It's imperative that we find people of substance, and that's what we take pride on here at the Behind the Mask podcast show. So take a look at this clip so you can see what substance really looks like.
I think we have to search our own souls. Nobody complains when we wear pink for a whole month and talk about breast cancer, and nobody complained when we did a whole campaign on domestic violence and how we needed to be responsible with that. It's only when we start talking about issues in Black and brown communities and we start talking about race where we're saying, I just want football.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and so I think we need to check ourselves on that.
Without further ado, let's bring in my man, Malcolm Jenkins. Where you at, homie?
What's going on, guys?
What's good? What's good?
All is good, bruh. This offseason, man, it's been busy for a lot of people amongst the COVID-19 and everything, but catch us up on some things. What you've been doing, what's been keeping your attention going?
Man, I mean, obviously all of the social unrest that's going on, the conversations and dialogue around, policing, COVID-19, how it's, affecting Black lives and the Black community. All of those things have been at the forefront of kind of my attention. But, on a more personal level, I've also been spending a lot of time, obviously, at home with my kids, really, bonding with them, getting some girl dad time. But it's been one of those things. It's been a crazy year so far. And, it's definitely kept me busy for sure.
Yeah, and you talked about policing. One of the things that you wanted to always make sure you keep a close eye on is just understanding the narrative, what comes behind that. A lot of people, when you see, they talk about defund the police, own banners, its own boxes, what people are writing out. When you see that, I truly think that it's a total, like, I won't call it negligence, but it's a total misunderstanding of what they mean by defund the police, because a lot of people feel like, well, if we don't have anybody to govern the bad people, then what are we going to do? Since you're knee deep in it, co-executive of the Players Coalition, co-founder, give us your thoughts or your strategy on defunding the police.
Yeah, I think the term defund the police is a lot more uncomfortable than the actual application of it. And I think a lot of people, when they learn about what it actually means, that they're really in line with the principles of it. What you're saying is every city has a budget, right? And if you look at the majority of cities around the country, they're spending 30 to 40% of their city budget on the police. And that's taken away from education, it's taken away from jobs, it's taken away from housing, from health services, all of these different things that are ailing our communities that when invested in have proven to decrease crime. And so we're saying it doesn't work. And then you add on, the violence and the abuse of power and authority that we see in our police departments, and people are asking for change. And so that's comes in two ways. It comes from a budgetary standpoint. How do you take that funds and decrease the police budgets and put those into other things? So you invest into your schools, you invest into infrastructure, you invest into a non-police respondents corps that are trained to deal with homelessness, mental issues, that are trained to be able to deal with children in schools, that can respond to domestic issues. These are all things that our police department right now are not trained to do. And we're asking them to do more than they are actually capable of. And if you ask any police chief, they would agree with that point. And so it's like, okay, well, let's push money and create a task force of people who are better suited to deal with the specific elements of our communities. But then from a budgetary standpoint, and I saw something the other day, it's like, well, what does it look like when you have officers who don't live in the community that come and they get paid by tax dollars, right? So in my community, it's being over-policed, it's being brutalized, it's being over-criminalized, and it's coming out of my tax dollars. And then you take that money and go to the suburbs and you fund your schools, you fund your infrastructure, and you take that money out of a community that already is lacking completely out. And so it's like, how do we make sure that the money that is already being siphoned out of these communities goes back into making them safer, because it's been proven that when you give people opportunity, you give people jobs, housing, it creates a safer community. And so those are things that people need to start looking at when we say defund the police. And we want them to focus mainly on the application. We don't want, people with guns showing up to deal with a homeless issue or domestic violence or, something in schools. We want the police to focus on violent crimes. And right now, you got about a 50-50 chance to get away with murder in almost any major city because they're not doing a great job of making arrests in violent crime. So we want them to be more efficient in focusing on those things that actually, matter. And when it comes to the, violent stop. So it's two things: changing the way that we fund our cities by taking it away from these police departments in the way that it doesn't work, but also rethinking the way that policing functions in our society and reinvesting in different task force that can deal with the specific needs of our citizens.
And you talked about some of that violence down here in Atlanta. We've had a string of gun violence in New York, Chicago, several major cities in the country. That narrative of defunding the police came out, I want to say a month or so ago. What do you say to the people that are like, you know what, if we defund the police, it's only going to be a direct correlation to the gun violence, to the things going on in our communities now?
Yeah, the gun violence happens anyway. Police, you call the police after the gun violence has already happened. So putting more money into policing doesn't stop gun violence. It never has. In fact, like I said earlier, most times in these violent crimes, you have a 50-50 chance. Or in Philadelphia, I think it was a 40% chance that they actually make an arrest. So 60% of the time, you get away with it. And so we want them to be more efficient and more effective in that place, which means that we don't need them doing a ton of traffic stops, what they already do. We don't need them doing stop and frisk and searching for things that they're not finding. We need them focused on the violent crime and those things so that we can feel safe and drive down gun violence. But when it comes to how do we service the community and make the community safer, it's pushing more opportunities for people to make a living, for more people to work for themselves, to get an education, to have equal housing. Those are things that directly drive down crime. And then we can have our police departments focus on the violent crime that nobody wants to see in their community.
And when you talk about push, it seems to be two different pushes when you talk about defunding the police. One is defunding the police, but the next one is procedural change. Changing the way that they were training, changing the way that they arrest people, understanding of hiring more diversity or having more diversity in the police stations so they can be sensitive to certain areas, even if they're not from there, to the point that you made. What do you think is the best way to go?
Well, me personally, I think we naturally think that policing is the solution. And I disagree with that notion. I think that I think policing is the problem. And when we look at the history of policing and how it functions, people talk about the policing system is broken. And I'm like, it's not broken. It's working the way that it's designed, the way that it was designed. And so we need to really change completely the way that we even think about policing. So it's not necessarily about, how do we train our officers to, have implicit bias? How do we train them to de-escalate? It's almost impossible to de-escalate a situation when you bring a gun into it. And so it's like, no, let them do what they're trained to do, trained to make arrests and help and stop violent crimes. Let's create another task force who is trained to do those things that we need to respond to these specific needs that our police department, we don't need to train them to do de-escalation or all those things. We have people already in place and services in place. We need to fund those and let them respond to the specific needs of the community.
One of the things that Takeo actually schooled me to was the police unions. They're often tasked with with changing the narrative of an officer if they've committed a crime or done something wrong, even if they know they're in the wrong, like they're representing regardless. So how do we impact change with the police union? Because it starts there as well, as they're ultimately just supporting police when things happen in a negative nature.
Yeah, so it's three people or three kind of levels of government that we need to put pressure on when it comes to policing. The number one is the mayor, because the mayor in most cities elects the police chief. They also set the budget for the city, and they negotiate the contracts with these unions. And to your point, the union's job is to protect officers. So they're going to do what they do, similar to how the NFLPA represents its players in their best interest. But the city and the mayor must negotiate fair contracts that represent the best or the with the interests of the community in mind, because it almost makes it, they can even, most of these contracts, you can fire an officer for doing something wrong, but because of that contract, they go into arbitration, they get their job back and get back pay for the time that they missed. And so it almost makes it impossible for them to be even held accountable because of these contracts. So we need to pay attention to the mayors and what they're doing. The second group is going to be the city council, because they approved the budget. And so similar to what happened here in Philadelphia, the budget was proposed by the mayor to have a $14 million increase that was going to go to policing, while every other, system was going to stay flat. And the city council voted against it and shut that down. So they have the power to change the budgetary part. But when it comes to also holding police accountable, not only just to get fired, but filing criminal charges against them, that's going to come from prosecutors. And most times the district attorney is an elected official. And that's one of those positions that we oftentimes don't talk about or don't participate in voting. And they've, most of them hold their chair for years and nobody, kind of pays attention to them. We have to make sure that we are voting and paying attention, holding them accountable, because they are the ones who can prosecute officers, who can actually file criminal charges when they do abuse their power, when they do, lie on people and falsify information and reports. When they go and kill somebody, that is who can actually hold them criminally accountable.
So it seems like the pressure needs to be put across the board from the police chief, the mayor, prosecutor, DA, attorney general, whoever is being voted into office. But how important is it for citizens to really realize, like, it's not just every 4 years to go out and vote. Every election that comes up in your community, that's when you need to get out. And if you want to impact change, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the times we get caught up in, as we should, we get caught up in the presidential election and what is happening nationally, when in reality, the most things that are going to affect us are from the state and local level. And oftentimes we don't pay attention to that down ballot. And those are the people who make the laws and make decisions that directly impact you. And so that's the biggest thing, I've been pushing people to do, is just to pay attention to all of those local, elections. Who's the district attorney, who's in city council, who's your police chief, and know, when those cycles are coming. Philadelphia, they have to renegotiate their contract with the police union, I think this December. And so people need to be paying attention and putting pressure on the mayor to make sure that he negotiates that in the best interest of the citizens.
Bro, I appreciate you using your platform and making sure that everybody is aware of how they can affect change or be a part of change. One of the things that came up that we all saw was that you're now a CNN contributor. I don't know how much on an often basis, but it would be good to have your take on that, on takes on social injustice. Deshaun Jackson recently made some comments about the Jewish population from the anti-Semitic, and people exploded. Everybody had their strong opinions, but you came out and you kind of just told everybody to pump the brakes. Your words were, "We can honor the Jewish heritage and trauma while staying focused on what matters. Jewish people aren't our problem, and we are not theirs. Let's not lose focus on what the problem truly is, and that's Black lives still don't matter in this country. Push the energy towards arresting the killers of Breonna Taylor." Do you care to give more insight on that? Because I felt like that was such a powerful statement to keep. It's not being insensitive, but it's just stating the true facts, black and white, of what we're going throughout this current climate.
Yeah, and the message is simple, is, as you sit back and kind of, and Deshaun's, comments were, just wrong, flat out. There's no justification, no excuses for that. But, as I sat back and just kind of watched how people respond to it, there was a lot of fighting between the Jewish community and Black voices. And I'm like, we're not each other's enemy. We got common backgrounds. We got common interests. We got common histories. The focus right now is on systemic racism. How do we attack systems? Because the systems are taking people's lives. I get it. We can fight about who says what, but if we're fighting against hate speech, then we're going to be fighting against everybody. And so for me, it's like, how do we stay focused on what we can actually change right now? Somebody making a mistake is wrong. Y'all going to light them up, and Twitter did what they do, as they should. But when it comes to this entire movement, we can't even afford to be distracted by things that don't get us to the goal. And the goal is to eradicate systemic racism, knowing that when we do things for Black people, it goes across the board for everybody. Because we oftentimes are, in any system you look at, are the most brutalized, the most marginalized, the most victimized. And so when we raise that floor, it helps everybody. And so it's at this moment in time, it's so important. I think this is such a big movement and moment in history that we cannot afford to let it slip by fighting against people who have the same interests.
It felt like a lot of people had that same interest. Some of my board members who are Jewish, I seen the posts on Facebook. Some of them were saying that our silence is now deafening. So it was kind of weird for me, because it took me a while to actually get into what Deshaun Jackson said. But how do you feel when people are now saying that to us? Like, now you guys' silence is deafening.
Well, I think there's a difference, and I want to be very sensitive about it, because we're talking about, protecting a legacy and a history and a fight for lives right now. And so I try not to be insensitive, but for myself, I did what I expect other people to do. I sat back and listened for a minute, because oftentimes it's not our place to just jump in front of any kind of movement or any subject and just start to blare things. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know a lot about the Jewish plight. I know about the Holocaust, but I don't really know. And so what I did was I sat back and I listened. I called a bunch of friends. I got Jewish people on my foundation board. I have Jewish friends that I do business with that I know, and I asked them, tell me what's going on. What were your thoughts on DJ's comments? And we had those dialogues, the same dialogue that we're asking people to have, with kind of the Black plight. But at the end of the day, my priorities are always going to be this movement for Black lives, because that's where I come from. That's my community. And that is the house that is currently on fire and has been on fire for over 400 years in this country. And right now there's an opportunity to actually move the needle, and I will not lose focus on that.
Bro, I think it's amazing how your focus is so, me and Tu, we talk about it all the time. We got to have Hawkeye focus, playing the game, leading up to a 16-game season if you're fortunate enough to go to the playoffs. Your focus is unparalleled when you look at it across the board. With all of what you have been going through and what's been going on, how have you been able to stay focused just on the game itself that allows you to have the platform that you have?
You mean football?
Just football, yeah.
Man, so see, football is like my safe space. That's like the easy part. Like I tell people all the time, the easiest part of the year for me is training camp. All I got to do is wake up, play ball, eat, go to sleep, and do it over again, right? Where the off season is when, I got all of these other, balls I'm trying to keep in the air and things that I'm doing. But, football to me is that outlet. It's that ability to be able to, to physically exhaust yourself, to kind of get that energy out, those frustrations out, but play the game that I've loved to play since I was in the third grade. And so for me, it's been really easy to focus on ball. Obviously, it takes a lot of time management. I have a great team around me that help me balance all of these different things. But for me, football is really that outlet for me to let loose, all these things. I keep my composure a lot when it comes to the things that we're dealing with in our society. And the football field is where I'm able to let that out.
And training camp is right around the corner. League still has some uncertainty going on. They're talking about banning jersey swaps at the end of the game. Guys got to stay 6 feet away from each other, even though they've just for 60 minutes been wrestling on a football field, running up and down a football field. Do you still have reservations about going into the season, knowing that the league is not 100% direct in terms of their plan moving forward?
Well, I'm on the executive committee with the PA, so I've been in these conversations And there's still things that are being negotiated with, from all the way from preseason games to some of the protocols to the protections that we need for players. But our number one priority is we understand we're not going to be able to eliminate risk and it's not going to be 100% safe. But how do we mitigate as much risk as possible, knowing that the players are the ones taking 100% of the risk? So how do we make sure that we have protections for guys if they do get sick? How do we make sure that the protocols are as tight as they can be to make sure that we limit, how many guys can get sick at once? But in our game, once we step on the field, our game is our game. And so, there's going to be some exposure. There's no way around that. I think guys are antsy, and I think our protocols and all of these things are probably going to change as the year goes on, as things change in society. We're watching, cases go up kind of all around the country. That's very concerning. But there's still a lot to be done in the next few weeks before we're set to report, and hopefully we can find a place where their guys feel comfortable enough to go back. But that's yet to be seen.
It's so weird to me, and Takeo and I talked about this, but like if you're a rookie DB coming out of Ohio State and you play Malcolm Jenkins in the Saints, at the end of the game, you watch this man through your college with you, through the league. How you not going to go out there and ask for his jersey at the end of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest, there's a lot more things I'm worried about than swapping jerseys this year. I can send you an email, you know what I mean? Really, I'm barely trying to tackle anybody. So, it's one of those things that, football is such a traditional game, right? Like we're so used to doing the same things over and over and over that it's really hard to imagine, bending football to COVID. But it's something that we're going to have to get used to. Playing without fans the guys can't even wrap their mind around that because we feed so much off of the crowd, but we're going to have to do that. It's
like a scrimmage, bro.
Yeah, basically. We're going to see how much guys love the game. Because it's going to be just for the love of the game and obviously, a paycheck.
No doubt. You gotta give it there, man. But salute to everything you do on the field, also off the field. Talk about your foundation and how can people support?
Yeah, so the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation, this is we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary in June. Been doing work started in New Orleans in 2010. And since then, we've been serving all of the states that I've called home. So New Jersey, where I'm from, Ohio, where I went to Ohio State, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania, obviously where I've been with the Eagles and the Saints. And it's just been the impact that, we've been able to have, I think, has just been phenomenal, between scholarships to food drives to STEM camps and different resources at football camp. But with COVID, hit, we've had to adjust and really pivot, how we service our communities because we can't do the face-to-face anymore. And so we've transitioned to how do we create a digital and virtual experience. So we launched, we call it Power Pathways. We're building out online curriculums to help people, on different career paths, people who are going a non-traditional route who may not go to college. Here are some of the hard skills and soft skills you may need to be able to be employed and get employed in a COVID kind of reality. So it's things as simple as PowerPoint, MailChimp, and all of these kind of online Zooms and these different platforms that everybody's trying to navigate through. But also being able to tell stories of people who went the non-traditional route and be able to showcase those examples of how you can still create opportunities for yourself by just using the skills you have, whether it's chefs and people who become content creators or who go on to work for themselves. There's so many different examples, and in my foundation, I've based it all around experiences because I know I'm one of those people. Once I see somebody else do it, and I know that it can be accomplished, like my talent and everything else takes over. And oftentimes our kids get stuck in a bubble where the only things they see, are negative, or the only success they see is the guy who's an athlete or who's an entertainer, or who's a drug dealer, and then knows that's the only way that they can imagine to get out. But once you show them another way, that there's options, you take them out of those environments, the natural talent that they have takes over. And so this is what we're trying to do, and reach more kids, obviously, because we're doing it on a virtual platform that kids can log on to and get access to the curriculum.
I'm a firm believer in you can't be what you can't see, especially when you out on the streets and you doing work, you giving back, showing them this is what you could be. But I want to ask you, after being a free agent, did you know, how soon did you know that you were going back to New Orleans where your professional career started?
Yeah, I knew pretty soon. They called pretty much the next day, or probably that same day, to be honest. They were talking to my agent. And to be honest, I knew if I wasn't going to be in Philly, then New Orleans is really the only other place I wanted to be. This is year 12 for me, and I'm not really trying to move my family around or be away from my family at an extended period of time. So being able to go back to New Orleans was really, a blessing. It lined up, perfect for me. And so I'm excited to get back there. Obviously, they got a really, really good team that I'm joining back into. The team is a lot bit different than it was when I was there 6 years ago.
You're an old head now, bro. Yeah. You're an old head.
Yeah. So but I'm excited, man. I think, myself and a couple other additions that they had this year, hopefully will be just that little bit that this team is needed to get over that edge and hopefully get that Lombardi.
And another one, right? How many? Yeah. With 2 going on 3?
Yeah, trying to get a third,
No doubt. That's amazing, man. Let me ask you this. I was in New Orleans. I spent a little bit of time there at the beginning of my career, but very culturally diverse city. Food is amazing. I say one of the best cities for food in America. What's your favorite food eatery down there in New Orleans, if you have one?
I think my favorite, if I'm there just for a day, I'm probably gonna get some crawfish or some charbroiled oysters. Like, I can't leave the city without getting one of those 2.
I can't eat either one. That's Takeo. Takeo eats all that eclectic food.
Eclectic? That's like a delicacy down there. What you mean?
Bro, this the same dude who would go to restaurants and order chicken in different ways. Baked chicken, fried chicken, chicken fingers, chicken strips,
chicken fricassee, whatever.
The bubble gum, chicken version.
Yeah, man. But before we let you get out of here, man, we know you're one of the best family men that we've seen come across the league, just exemplifying what you stand for, a businessman, going into your 12th year in the NFL. You got the rings, several charitable initiatives that you already started, co-founder of the Player Coalition. When it's all said and done, what do you want your Malcolm Jenkins story, or how do you want your Malcolm Jenkins story to be told?
Man, when it's all said and done, I think I want to be remembered by the impact that I had. Was I able to change the game? Was I able to change the environments around me? So whether it was the locker room, the game, the team, the city, the country, anything that I touch, I want to have an impact on the culture around me. And I'm still working on that. But I think, there's obviously a lot of work to be done, a lot of room to do that. And I see that opportunity to bring others along with me. And I think that is going to be more of my legacy than anything, not just how far I went, but how many people, did I bring along with me, and how much impact did I have on the people around me and the environment around me.
I think that's one of the most amazing things about you and the trajectory of your career. People may not remember your last football snap, but they will remember how you impacted and affected their lives off the field. So you're on the right path. So salute, brother.
I appreciate you.
Salute, man. We appreciate the time, Malcolm. We can help you anytime, bro. You definitely reach out and let us know. We always do the same and support great substance.
No doubt. I appreciate you, brother.
Right on, bro.